Suriname between 1900 and 1950, colonial control, labor shifts, and seeds of independence. In the first half of the 20th century, Suriname remained under Dutch colonial rule, navigating through global wars, economic transitions, and emerging political consciousness. While not yet at the brink of independence, the years between 1900 and 1950 laid critical groundwork for the social and political transformations that would define Suriname's later decades. Colonial economy and the end of the plantation era. By 1900, Suriname's once thriving plantation economy, built largely on enslaved labor and later indentured servitude, was in visible decline. The abolition of slavery in 1863 and the end of the 10-year forced labor transition period in 1873 had left a vacuum in plantation labor. To maintain production, the Dutch turned to imported labor from British India from 1873 onward and Java from 1890s, bringing in thousands of contract workers. By the early 20th century, many Hindustani, Indian, and Javanese immigrants had completed their indentured contracts and began settling permanently in Suriname. This led to the emergence of a multi-ethnic society, adding to the African-descended Creole population and the indigenous communities already present. While some former contract workers acquired land and became independent farmers, many remained economically marginalized, working in poor conditions. Limited social services and infrastructure. Under Dutch rule, Suriname's development lagged behind other colonies. Education, healthcare, and infrastructure were underfunded and unequally distributed, favoring urban elites in Paramaribo. The majority of the population lived in rural or interior regions with little access to basic services. The colonial government maintained strict control over political and economic life. A small group of Dutch administrators and Creole elites dominated public affairs. Native Surinamese had little say in governance, and political participation was heavily restricted by literacy and income qualifications. World War I and the interwar period, 1914–1939. Although Suriname was not directly involved in World War I, the conflict disrupted international trade, affecting exports like sugar, cocoa, and gold. The economic downturn led to food shortages and increased hardship, particularly among rural and immigrant communities. In the interwar period, modest reforms began to take shape. The 1920s and 1930s saw the rise of trade unions and workers' movements demanding better wages and labor protections. Early attempts at political organization, though parties were often ethnically divided, the continued decline of sugar plantations and a gradual economic shift toward bauxite mining, which would later become a major export. Social tensions rose during this period, particularly in the 1930s as the Great Depression further strained the economy. Protests and strikes occasionally erupted, reflecting growing dissatisfaction with colonial governance. World War II and strategic importance, 1939–1945. World War II had a profound impact on Suriname. Though still a Dutch colony, Suriname came under U.S. military protection in 1941, after the Netherlands was occupied by Nazi Germany. The U.S. presence aimed to secure the country's strategic bauxite reserves, critical for aluminum production during the war. This militarization brought significant infrastructure development, roads, airstrips, and ports, an economic boom in bauxite exports, increased employment opportunities, especially in mining and transportation. However, these changes also highlighted the economic inequality and political disenfranchisement of the Surinamese people. The rise of political consciousness, post-1945. The post-war years marked a turning point. Returning soldiers, rising literacy, and global movements for decolonization encouraged new political demands in Suriname. The Dutch, weakened by the war and facing independence movements elsewhere, notably Indonesia, began cautiously liberalizing colonial governance. In 1948, a major milestone occurred. Universal suffrage was introduced, allowing all adult Surinamese citizens, regardless of race, gender, or income, to vote for the first time. This opened the door to greater political participation and laid the groundwork for full independence decades later. Conclusion: between 1900 and 1950, Suriname remained under tight Dutch control, yet the seeds of transformation were being sown. Economic shifts from plantations to mining, the rise of immigrant communities, wartime development, and post-war political reform all contributed to the slow unraveling of colonial rule. The events of this period set the stage for Suriname and Suez's eventual independence in 1975 and continue to shape its diverse society today.